We are being captured on video, ladies and gentlemen.
Correct.
We are on. I don't understand what you guys are live and ready to go.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Skokie District 68 School Board meeting for October 21st, 2021. And we have a roll call.
Bill Jordan. Here. Espinoza. Here. Joseph.
Here.
Ruffner.
Here.
Sturban.
Here.
Sullivan. Here. Warshaw. Here. Thank you.
We will now open our meeting for public comment. Please remember this is not a dialogue between you and the board. If you have a specific issue which requires a response, Superintendent Garwood or the appropriate person will get back to you. Please state your name and your connection to Skokie School District 68. Please limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. And finally, avoid comments specific to any person, student, or staff member respecting their right to privacy.
Hi there, my name is Jill Bowman and I am a parent from Highland Elementary. Thanks for hearing me out tonight. This is only the second school board meeting that I've been to ever, so I'm not really quite sure how it all works. And I'm here also to learn and to make a few concerns or comments. I did come last week. That was my first board meeting. I probably should have been here a year and a half ago. But so I'm going to skip to the end of my talk just in case I can't get it all in. But I have a few questions. My first question is, if a vaccinated teacher, staff member, or student can transmit and catch COVID-19, how does that make our schools safer? Okay. Number two, what are the safety studies, the science to back up the premise that a classroom with a vaccinated teacher and a vaccinated student population is actually going to make our environment safer than an unvaccinated teacher and an unvaccinated student body? Number three, would we be able to show the science, or would you be able to show the science demonstrating that vaccinating our school will lead to eradication of the virus? And is this the premise we are working towards? I know I've missed a lot probably, and I apologize if these things have been covered, okay? Is it possible as parents, can we have access to data on testing that's going on in our schools, which I think is great, and throughout the district, is it possible for us to have data to that? So let's see here. I'm going to skip through some of this because I know I'm limited. Can I get a show of hands if how many parents are here tonight? Okay. Is that okay to ask? And let's see here. I know last week we were talking a little bit about some of our teachers and the religious and medical exemptions, and in the name of safety, we've let some of those people go. And safety is really what we all want. I would like to talk a little bit today about the elephant in the room that kind of no one wants to talk about, it seems like. Does vaccination really make the classroom or the school safer? A vaccinated individual can transmit COVID-19. We've seen a lot of breakthrough cases. We can also catch it as a vaccinated individual, and we can die of COVID, unfortunately. At the best, the vaccines will protect us from severe outcome, maybe for 6 months, but that's always waning, and it also depends on the individual. So, my question is, so I'm just kind of interested in looking at that, and if there's any science that's backing up our decision-making here on that. I know we are doing saliva tests, and I'm also wondering, I don't know the details of that, but I'm wondering if everyone's getting tested, including the vaccinated individuals weekly, because we have such a wonderful opportunity with this data to really look at the science in our own district. So if it was equal for vaccinated and unvaccinated students to get tested weekly, we could really look at the science. And I'm just wondering if that's happening, or I'd love to know more information about that. And I think we have a real wonderful opportunity to look at that safety right here in our own district. Find out which do some groups, are they likely to be more asymptomatically positive? Is the vaccinated group more likely to be, asymptomatically positive? Is the unvaccinated group more likely to be symptomatically positive? Does it lead to outbreaks in the school? And I'm wondering if we are really doing that science, or are we more interested in rewarding those that have gotten vaccinated instead of doing that actual science? It's interesting that the CDC recommended in May that we don't test the vaccinated individuals anymore. I thought that was interesting, considering we have a novel virus and we also are dealing with a brand new vaccine. Why wouldn't we want as much data about this as possible to really look at what's going on? So let's see if there's anything else. I'd also love to know how many people have looked at VAERS data. If I can get a show of hands, how many people know what VAERS is? Okay, so VAERS is our Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. It's our national database in the US. Unfortunately, it's quite antiquated, and for even me to get on there and find the data is quite difficult to look at the adverse effects. So if we're talking about safety, I think in our classrooms, we really need to look at the VAERS data. This is something that no one's talking about either. And there's like a lack of transparency with our government, the state, in looking at, if we're going to keep our classrooms safe, we have to know what the risks are too. And if we don't have the data, the adverse events, we're not really looking at the whole picture. So that's just what I wanted to speak about. And if anyone can point me in the right direction with some of these questions, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I think you've given us your contact information. I can follow up with a phone call with you and try to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you so much.
And questions that I can't answer, I can probably point you in the direction of experts who can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Phyllis, do we have any submitted public comments?
We do not.
Okay. Thank you. We shall now move on to our superintendent's reports.
Okay, so our first one is our monthly school return to learn update. As of today, we have 4 positive cases in the district, 3 students and 1 staff member. To date, I believe we've had approximately 20 positive cases in 2 months. So right now we have 3 kids who are home because they are infected. We have an additional 6 children who are quarantining at home because they did not sign up for the test to stay program with the PCR test, so they have to quarantine for those 14 days. So we have a total of 9 students quarantined at the moment, 3 who are positive and 6 who aren't participating in the test to stay. That number has gone down. I think as of Friday we had 5 positive students and a couple positive staff members, so the number has gone down a little bit. That trends with the number going down locally as well. It's a gradual drop off as I'm watching the data on our data sites. It's not a precipitous decline, but it's definitely continuing to go down at this time. We'll stay tuned and we'll see what the fall does, and transition from outdoor to indoor activities and family holidays. We'll see what that brings as well. In the meantime, we are continuing with our SHIELD testing. That program has been very effective for us to be able to identify positive cases and reduce the amount of students who need to quarantine. I think SHIELD is going through some growing pains right now as more districts come online. We were one of the first 70 districts in the state to get on. And I think there's several hundred more slated to get on within the next month or so. So we're seeing a little bit of strain to their system. The results are taking a little bit longer to come back than they originally did. We're hoping those are kinks that will get ironed out because the quicker we get those results, the more effective we are at reducing the amount of students after quarantine. A bit of positive news is I have been informed that vaccinations for the 5 to 11-year-old group should be approved within the next couple of weeks. And I've been told that I should go ahead and sign the district up for vaccination clinics as early as November, and with follow-up dates in December before the winter holiday. So I have secured 4 tentative dates. I can't release the dates quite yet until they get the approval, but they promised me dates in November and December. So that's looking very positive. I do have a concern, though, in that when the Skokie Health Department ran our vaccination clinics last year for our junior high kids ages 12 and above, we were able to have parents provide consent by paper. Kids came to school. We bussed them all over to the vaccination clinic site, and we were able to vaccinate approximately 60% of our kids who had signed up to be vaccinated in that 12-plus age group. We recently ran one of these new clinics that's sponsored by the state, and they use different providers. The providers are requiring a physical presence of parents to sign those consent forms, which I understand on the one hand, their cautious approach with safety and with individual students. The downside of it, though, is that it'll reduce the amount of people who are able to participate in those vaccination clinics unless they can take a little time off from work to be there and do that. I've spoken with the Skokie Health Department. They're working to see if they can't field clinics as well, similarly to how they did before. They just don't have the go-ahead to be able to do that yet. So that situation's a little bit fluid, but we'll see. And I'm hopeful that we'll have vaccinations available for parents who choose to get their children vaccinated at this time. I have not heard anything about mandates for children in the state of Illinois yet. At this point, I know California has mandated students be vaccinated. I haven't heard that conversation occurring locally here in the state yet. I would not be surprised that this vaccine or some form of this vaccine becomes a mandate similar to the other vaccines that are required. That would not surprise me if that comes down at some point. All in all, teachers are working extraordinarily hard. Our principals are working extraordinarily hard to make things work. There's a lot of extra hoops to jump through for everybody. Basically every step of the educational process, from getting on the bus to coming into the buildings to lunch and recess and classroom activities, and everything is a little bit different. It's certainly much improved over last year, and we're hoping that it continues to improve as more children become vaccinated. I think we'll be able to see that we'll see less kids coming down with COVID for shorter periods of time with less egregious effects. So we're feeling like we're heading towards a positive moment here as we go into the fall. But at the same time, we're doing that with vaccinations. If you recall last year about this time was when there was a lot of talk about the surge, and sure enough, when November came, the surge, was a dramatic, steep cliff to climb. We're hoping that the conditions of the fall don't create another surge or some other variant comes along and does that as well. So right now we're feeling pretty hopeful. And I want to thank our teachers, principals, and our bus drivers for all that they do. Our office staff, our health clerks, everybody is working extra hard compared to non-COVID times right now. So my kudos to everyone who is sharing in all of that hard work. I do have concerns about staff members. I have concerns about our administrative team because it's a lot. It's a lot of extra stress to be carrying around. So we are attempting to find ways to recognize that stress and to alleviate it where we can. That's about all I have for the return to our update for today. Any questions? All right. We can move over the second superintendent report, which is our annual student achievement report by Dr. Samajer.
Yes. So as mentioned in the student achievement memo, this report looks a little bit different, doesn't have quite the full information that we have historically provided for you. We did not provide an achievement report last year because we didn't really have any testing data. So just want to preface that. We always like to share our racial and ethnicity diversity over our major groups of students, and over time you can see that not much movement is occurring between the last several years. The same is true for our additional learner characteristics, everything from mobility to students identified in the special education program, English learners, low income, and those have been about the same. We are seeing a bit of a decline in enrollment. We are at 1,762 students. I think that's as of our 6th-day enrollment. So a slight little decline. I know Dr. Garwood has spoken about that previously. So I'll share with you some of the data that we've been able to collect around the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. In general, as you know, this is an assessment that's administered to 3rd through 8th grade in English language arts and in math. It's a computer-based assessment. Pandemic assessment looked a little bit different. Of course, we had the waiver for 2020, so no tests were administered. We were required to assess students this past year. Due to our hybrid model of schooling, we tested about 450 students who were attending school in person. We did extend invitations to students who were learning remotely from home to have their parents come in and take the assessment, and shockingly, no one took us up on that. So we had less than half of our students take the assessment. We usually test around 1,200 students. It was about 450 last spring. We also do not have any state comparison data. ISB allowed school districts to choose between testing last spring or holding off and testing this fall. And so there are still some districts around the state that are taking last year's assessment this fall. And so, yes, very interesting. So once that testing has concluded and state level data is able to be assimilated, we will have a comparison, but at the moment we don't. We're expecting our official scores to be posted to the Illinois report card. I believe it's in embargo right now until the end of the month, and then it will be released, but it will probably be reported officially on the Illinois report card site in winter or 2022, after January. So we know that we're going to see some dips, especially looking at a much smaller population of students. So this shows the percentage of students who were proficient on IR math. You can see the light green line is representing the 2018 stats, and red or orange is 2019. There's no data for 2020. And then 2021 is the green bar. So not a beautiful picture, but a picture that is probably similar to across Illinois.
It's a random list, if I can just quickly. You're really looking at a 2-year to compare cohorts, correct? The 2019 6th grade class would be the 2021 8th grade class, is that right?
Yes.
So there is at least one group that increased over those 2 years.
Yes, and we have looked internally at the cohort data. We just did not present it here tonight because it is a very convoluted looking chart, and because of that 2020 gap.
There's a small sample too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, even when they come back with that comparison data, I'm not sure how that works if there's a lot of school districts that are testing 5 or 6 months later. It's not the same,
No.
so
Right.
even that's going to be somewhat flawed, I think.
Yes, it will. So just kind of take note of the 2021 numbers here for proficiency with math. And I'm going to flip to the reading or English language arts. There it goes. So still not where we want it, obviously, but a better picture than math, which is interesting.
I figured kids might have spent more time reading during the pandemic than they did doing math problems in their
I
leisure
like
time.
it.
Yeah.
I think this actually supports all of the research that says that reading in volume is what will actually increase students' proficiency in reading. And it was probably much easier for parents to tell their children to go read a book or to sit down and read a book with them than to pull out some math content and work on that. So those are our results for IAR with the numbers of percentage of students who are proficient across the board there. This chart represents a piece of our school improvement plan. You've seen this back in 2017-18 when we began this school improvement process, but basically what we are attempting to do here is use our starting point of 2017-18 with 34% of students meeting or exceeding state math standards, and our goal is to incrementally increase until 2022, when we were hoping to achieve more than 40%. You can see our trend line in green was moving us that direction. We were making that movement in 2018-19, and then COVID. So we will begin again. Our new baseline data will be probably this year's data, not last year's data. So we'll use 21-22 data as a baseline for renewing our school improvement goal, our SMART goal, and the intended outcomes towards that. So we also are showing you here the percent proficient by subgroups, looking at our English learners, our students in special education, and our students identified as low income. And again, across 2018, 19, and 21.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What percentage of the overall percentage of students that were coming here to test, like of the 450, are part of like those categories?
What is each percentage of
Or,
those?
I mean, you don't have to give me like an actual breakdown, but I'm thinking, for example, right, like a lot of parents who needed extra support sent their students who were special ed to school when we were able to go back, right? So like if we're factoring that into the overall, like how does that change numbers when it's such a tiny percentage that we were looking at versus an overall population?
Right, it's still a very tiny population, I
Right,
believe,
okay.
for the English learners. The 1% of students who were proficient, I believe, was Brian with one student.
There's one student, right, out of less than 100, so a little bit of rounding there, but less than 100 yields.
So again, kind of a grain of salt looking at this data because it doesn't represent the true subgroup. Right. It doesn't represent everyone within that subgroup who would have taken the test had they been in person. So the other Illinois assessment that we take is the ISA, the Illinois Science Assessment, generally to 5th and 8th grade students, again, computer-based. The test originated in 2016. We did not test in 2020. And then in 2021, again, we tested less than half of the 5th and 8th grade students. Those scores have not been released at all. So we don't even have preliminary scores. And just a note that when we do receive those scores, the only information we get is the percent of students who met or exceeded. We get no breakdown by performance areas or sub-skills within science, life science, earth science. It's just they either were proficient or they were not.
In other
So
words, it's not very useful for us anymore for planning purposes. Yeah.
I was saying it without saying it. So no data to report on this one. And then the last little section here is our results for our NWEA map. Again, in general, We administer this 3 times a year for students 2nd through 8th grade. This school year, we included 1st grade students taking the math only. It's a nationally normed test, it's adaptive, and it's used to measure student growth. We attempted testing last fall when we were in remote instruction, and it did not go very well. There were technical issues, and there were some helpful parents who assisted with the assessments. And so generally speaking, the results were not considered valid or reliable. So we did not attempt winter or spring testing last year. And this fall, we did resume taking it with all students. So these, this chart is the percent of students who met or exceeded the 70th percentile. And the reason we look at the 70th percentile on MAP is students who score at the 70th or higher, they are most likely to meet or exceed on the state IAR test. So we look at that as sort of a benchmark. In the fall, if they're at the 70th percent or higher, then they are most likely, if they are at IAR testing grade, to meet or exceed on the state test in the spring. So we, this is a breakdown across the grade levels as well as the district, looking at the percent of students who were at the 70th percentile or higher in fall of 2019, which was the last real administration of MAP, compared to this fall, and skipping 2020. So we have a little bit of a decline, as you can see. But again, I kind of want to point out the difference between math and reading. So the same trend is true for our MAP testing as it was for IAR. Reading is looking a little bit better than math.
Second grade.
Yeah.
Better in both. Improved.
Yeah.
And this is without or with helpful parents?
The red is the red is without helpful parents.
We didn't include that information because our parents did very well on the assessment.
Assuming the 8th graders were exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So given all of that, what is our focus for the school year? We really are focusing on that multi-tier system of support, MTSS, thinking about our practices and the framework that is used in the district for servicing students that might fall into Tier 1 instruction, Tier 2, or Tier 3, thinking about SEL, behavior, academics, all of those pieces fall under MTSS. And we are doing some work around that with the Illinois MTSS network, as we've mentioned previously. We're working to centralize information around tiered support for students in across the district in a system called Branching Minds. We're looking at quality core instruction, again, academic and SEL through district-wide strategies. Teacher clarity continues to be a focus for us as a district, making sure that teachers are clear about what they're teaching and how they are going to know that students are learning. We're also leveraging our instructional support team, which includes our new 5 MTSS specialist positions, our instructional coaches, our reading and our math specialists. To provide structures around data analysis for student learning, to provide guidance around best practices. They're doing a lot of that work through PLCs during grade level department meeting days, institute day, before after school lunchtime. They're really working hard to meet with teachers and help teachers. And then the last little piece is that really this year is going to be about creating a new baseline. So using classroom assessments, using MAP, reading fluency, which we administer to kindergarten and first grade students and students in 2nd through 8th grade who have an IEP in reading. Our IAR, our ISA, Imagine Learning, which is a tool that's used for our EL students. And then our SEL screener data. So really all of those pieces that kind of come together and help inform our district improvement plan and our school improvement plans will be a baseline this year. We'll kind of be starting from scratch, but I don't believe that we're in a position that's really any different than any other district around. Any questions for me?
Do you know if the, so when you said the IAR data would be in there on this, was it the IAR data to be in the IRC report card for next year? Do you know if they're nationally norming that too? Because that data would be really off, I feel like.
I don't know.
The IAR, I don't think that's
So-
national.
It's not, I mean, 'cause I mean, like she was mentioning, where for the districts who are testing now, they have like triple the amount of kids who they'll have data for versus us, but we have 450. I just found it interesting that would.
I don't think
still
that
be
data
reflected.
is gonna be all that valid to look at.
I
Because
think
it's
so.
testing two different groups of kids at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
6 months apart, so it's not really, you
Yeah.
can't really
Right.
compare it anymore, so.
Yeah, I think
When
that's
they do come back with that data.
right.
I'm just thinking from like a school rating perspective, I was like, that, really hope they don't factor that in at all. It's not consistent.
Well, it'll be used for our school report card.
Yeah.
What that really means, and what truth is behind that is probably unclear.
There's a lot to sort out with future data that we'll be collecting with kids through these assessments. At this point, we have enough information to be able to surmise that yes, their, learning is not the same as it was, when we last tested. But we still don't even know the extent of that because we don't have data for a large swath of kids yet.
Katrina?
But just a quick question, across the three different assessments that we talked about, the theme that was reiterated appropriately was that the reading scores were less concerning than the math scores, even though the whole lot is concerning. Should we assume then that the focus of 2021, 2022 will of course cross reading, math, and other areas, but will be particular extra attention to math, just given, how significantly lower the math scores were than reading? Should we assume that, or how are you all focusing your energies? It's all important, it's all
Right.
critical, but, are you doing some more intentional things around math because of the need to regrow those skills?
We are actually, ISB has recommended that we focus on priority standards across all content areas as a method for accelerating learning. And accelerating learning meaning let's take students from where they are and move them forward versus kind of what many of us think of accelerated learning as advanced learning. So in order to do that, and unfortunately, when ISB issued the priority standards for math, they really didn't prioritize anything. They included all standards. So we've been using Achieve the Core, we've been using some other resources to help us identify some critical areas of focus for each grade level. And we're using that information to help teachers, the instructional support team is working with grade levels to help teachers identify what are the critical areas of focus that are relevant for your grade level, and how does that, how do the Common Core standards align to those, and then which of those are a focus or a focal point for Unit 2 in the Bridges curriculum. And then how do we take that information and identify our learning intentions and our success criteria, what kind of assessments are we going to use to identify how students are learning. So we've been really working on creating these unit overviews or unit snapshots to really help teachers kind of dig into what is it that we need to be focusing on, what are those critical areas, and how do we take kids and move them forward with explicit instruction versus we're just going to open the Bridges chapter, go to Unit 2, and go lesson by lesson, regardless of if they're needed or not. So that intentional work in PLCs with the instructional support team has been really critical, and I think help kind of open open up teachers' eyes in terms of, okay, I really can let that piece go and focus on this piece instead, because this is a more critical area that we need to spend time on to move kids forward.
I appreciate the redefinition of acceleration
Yeah.
in this context. You know, it's not a secret that many parents across the nation are worried about the so-called gap year, a new kind of form of gap year, and you know, making our students whole in terms of what, you know, backfilling, so to speak, what they, you know, weren't able to get. So I appreciate that that approach for what it's.
Chrissy, I have a question. And it's not really about the test results, but you have the breakdown of the different learner characteristics. Our English learners didn't strike me as static. It looks like it's going up pretty consistently year to year. It's gone up about 8% over the course of what you've got in the chart. But when you look at the demographics of the district, they're pretty constant. And I wasn't sure if you knew, or if anyone in the district knows, is it a specific population or language that we're getting more people that are still needing help learning English? Because we have so many different, you know, people from different countries, different language backgrounds coming in. And taking a step away from the test results, which are important, but as you said, there's a lot about things that,
Yeah.
you know, we might not want to look too closely at. I just wasn't sure if this is some sort of shift in the population that we're serving that we need to try to drill down on to make sure that we can catch students and support them independent of the test results.
So we do. We make a concerted effort to support students that, or to support teachers in supporting students that are second language learners. One of the things we're doing for literacy in particular is we're working with a consultant from the Illinois Resource Center who is an expert in serving ELs. And so she helps support classroom teachers in literacy instruction for English learners. So there are concerted efforts in that regard. In terms of breaking down the subgroup of English learners into different languages and kind of digging that way, we have not done that. Dr. Marlar could probably speak to if there's an increased influx maybe of particular areas. You have anything to add in that regard?
Well, I mean, we serve on a given day anywhere between 65 and 70 different language groups, and that's remained pretty constant over the past 5 years. I did notice in enrollment this fall that approximately 3 out of every 4 new enrollees was coming from a language background other than English, and about 33 to 40% of those children were eligible for EL services when we screened them. So, but since we've modernized our EL program design, that was in 2018, the amount of instruction that ELs are getting that is comprehensible has increased dramatically. So they went from receiving anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes a day of comprehensible instruction to now 5.5 hours, 6 hours of comprehensible instruction provided by a teacher with advanced training in how to work with English learners.
Right now, it's a criteria for hiring employees that they have that EL endorsement. So we're gradually getting close to that 100% at the elementary level. I mean, we're not 100%, but we're probably 90% or so of our elementary classroom teachers are EL endorsed at this time. So
we went from, when I first came, we had, I believe, 9 ESL teachers, and now we have 53 over 5 years. And we have people who are in school right now getting that additional credential. it's really, to teachers' credit, really improved.
Yeah, that's a draw, right? So that increases, not a coincidence.
Thank you, all three.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Joe, did you have a question on
No, I
that?
thought, well, did you raise your hand earlier?
I did, but I don't think I was just curious, like, my presumption is that this is gonna be going on all over the state in wildly different ways depending on the district. And so I was just curious if there's any implications at the state level in terms of how they're even gonna be looking at this report card, but I don't even know if that's a question that anyone could even answer at this point, so I'll withdraw.
If only we knew.
Oh, I had a great
Everything
answer
you know.
Is the answer is complicated?
Thank you.
So I do have a few ad hoc superintendent reports here. First of all, tomorrow is National Bus Driver Appreciation Day. I sent out a notice earlier today about that, so kudos to our bus drivers. They perform a vital function for us and do that under duress and do an excellent job. I know that some of you have seen articles and are aware of school districts that have a bus driver shortage and that, had to close schools or, do other things, not transport, large numbers of kids. We are very fortunate that we have a very loyal and dedicated bus driver group. We have all of our positions filled. I believe we have pretty much since the first day of school, so we have not had any of the troubles that some of the other school districts have had. So kudos to all of our bus drivers for the wonderful job they do for keeping our kids safe and getting them to and from school every day.
Do they like the new schedule?
It gives them more time. They're not as harried because they have a little bit more time between that first and second tier. So it's definitely, I think, helping them out a little bit so that they don't feel like they are running on quite as tight a schedule as they were before. The second thing, speaking of appreciation, I have just about every day this year I've gotten out into our buildings at some point or the other to check in with our principals, see how they're doing, so I can understand what challenges they're facing, see what solutions we can help bring them to be able to run all the extra layers of school that are going on right now. And I have just been remarkably impressed every single time I've been out. Our principals are, literally sleeves rolled up. They're helping with shield testing. They are out on the playground at lunch because they're short on supervisors. They're in the lunchroom. They are, helping with contact tracing and contacting parents. I mean, there's so many extra layers that they have that are on top of all the other layers, of work that they have. And they have been nothing but absolutely positive and cheerful and grateful for the opportunity to be here in the district and to serve our kids, our teachers, and our parents. Next Friday is Principal Appreciation Day. Joe, I believe we have a proclamation to share from the state of Illinois about Principal Appreciation Day that Joe has volunteered to read for us. Principals, if you'll notice, they're not here in the audience tonight. I gave them the opportunity to stay home and watch from home this evening is a small deposit in recognition for all the hard work that they do.
I won't put them on the spot and ask for a head count, but text me if you can't hear this. This is a proclamation from the state of Illinois. Whereas school principals play an integral role in the education and growth of children in elementary, middle, and secondary schools across the state of Illinois. And whereas school principals are responsible for promoting education and building relationships with parents and teachers to ensure that each child receives services that allow them to excel in the classroom. And whereas it is the primary responsibility of the state of Illinois to preserve and improve resources for schools so that all students have access to a quality education and a foundation for a successful future. And whereas educational leaders face many challenges in supporting and educating our young people, and it is through their perseverance and passion that Illinois continues to produce quality, career-ready students. And whereas the Illinois Principals Association, which represents over 6,000 educational leaders statewide, believes that learning is a lifelong process and that the education of our children is the highest priority. And whereas during the 2021-22 school year, the Illinois Principals Association will celebrate 50 years dedicated to developing, supporting, and advocating for innovative school leaders. And whereas school principals and learning leaders have faced unprecedented challenges related to COVID-19 during the 2019-21 and 2020-21 school years, and worked tirelessly to provide uninterrupted learning during an ongoing pandemic. And whereas we must continue to encourage, support, and recognize our school leaders who have a positive impact on Illinois students and the educational system in the land of Lincoln. Therefore, I, J.B. Pritzker, Governor of the State of Illinois, do hereby proclaim the week of October 24th through 30th, 2021 as Principals Week, and Friday, October 29th, 2021 as Principals Day in Illinois to recognize principals for all that they do to help our children learn and succeed.
Principals out there in the audience, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say I'll change out of my pajamas and into something nice so I can say hi to Greg Hansen next time I drop my, next week when I drop my kid off at
Excellent
school.
job reading the.
I don't want to hold up the line of cars. That would only stress me out.
Couple other short updates. I'm pleased to announce that the parent mentor program is forming again, so we will have parent mentors this year. Very excited about that, and I know our parents who are participating and the teachers who are hosting them are very excited as well. We hosted our first parent-teacher conferences over the last couple of weeks, and we offered parents the option to participate via Zoom remotely or to attend in person. And overall, it's about a 50-50 split. I think a lot of parents really appreciated the ease of being able to participate in a parent-teacher conference without having to get up and go to school, especially if you have other children and childcare issues. So that may well be a model we look to going forward, even post-pandemic, if that continues to work well for everyone. Also, I have a couple of updates from Deanna Juarez, our family engagement coordinator, and she had a couple of announcements that she shared with me, which I'm very happy to share. So, District 68 families have received over $5,000 from the Angelo Militello DCFS Emergency Fund. This fund is set up to help families who might not otherwise qualify for assistance through government agencies. The funds are sent to utility companies for outstanding balances, to landlords for rent, and/or organizations to cover costs of childcare or after-school care for children, with the priority on those who are 0 to 8 years old. Deanna works with some families who applied and did not receive these funds to secure assistance through the Niles Township government's emergency grant. So not only has she helped the parents apply to get the funds, those who did not get awarded the grant, she's helping them find other avenues to be able to get funds to support their needs. Additionally, the Skokie Hospital's Loyalty Committee shared a large donation of school supplies, and through that donation, we were able to provide 46 of our students with backpacks and school supplies for the year, approximately $5,000 worth of school supplies. We have some left, and we're going to reserve those for students who register this year who need supplies, especially as we expect some refugees to be arriving in the district at some point as well. While I'm on the topic of backpacks, Deanna's also working with Bonnie Agnasanti, District 68 parent and township supervisor. A shout out to her. She is working on a plan to provide a backpack full of school supplies for every single child who is on free and reduced lunch next year in the school, which is approximately half of our kids. So they supplied us with quite a bit of school supplies at the beginning of the year, but they have a very lofty plan and they're getting started on it early to be able to meet that goal. So Bonnie, thank you very much. We are very excited to help with that. And I believe Bonnie will be approaching us to use our track maybe for some fundraising to help support those efforts as well. Great. And that is it for my superintendent report.
All right, we shall now move on to a reading and acceptance of minutes. I call for a motion to approve the minutes from the September 23rd, 2021 Board of Education regular meeting.
Second.
Espinosa.
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Bruckner.
Yes.
Sturban.
Yes.
Sullivan.
Yes.
Warshaw.
Yes.
Beljordan.
The consent agenda is our next item of business. Does any member wish to remove any item for separate consideration? No. Then I call for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the personnel report, authorizing the leave of absence and retirement for licensed staff, the hire and retirement for classified staff, financial reports, pay orders and expenditures, and second reading for Board of Education policies 5.10, equal employment opportunity and minority recruitment, 6.145, migrant students, 6.255, assemblies and ceremonies, and 7.280, communicable and chronic infectious disease.
So moved.
Second.
Joseph.
Yes.
Bruckner.
Yes.
Sturban.
Yes.
Sullivan.
Yes.
Warshaw.
Yes.
Beljordan.
Yes.
Espinosa.
Yes.
There was a fifth one in there. Is it okay that I didn't mention it?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
We're just trying to be transparent. It's still counts.
Thank you.
My mistake.
It's in the published document. Thank you. All right, we move on to our reports and discussion items.
Okay, so our first one this evening is the 2021 Resolution Committee report. You have a hard copy in front of you, and I believe you would also receive an electronic copy. So every year, the Illinois Association of School Boards participates in the Triple I Conference. That's 3 major educational organizations host this annual conference. I believe this year it falls the 3 days right after our November board meeting. And they have a delegate assembly there. So there's a representative from every board who's part of the Illinois Association of School Boards who's present. And they look at different issues and recommendations that they have for legislators. So in other words, position statements that they would like to make to try to get pushed through legislation. So every year they come out with new resolutions, they package them like this, in the committee report, and then school boards across the state weigh in with their delegate, who this year, Joe Ruffner will be our delegate, first time. It's a very exciting thing. Frank always used to come back very excited talking about holding up the paddles and the old time voting system they used to use. So you guys all have some homework between now and the next board meeting. If you would read over the new resolutions, and you'll see there's on page 4, there's sort of a cheat sheet for all the different things that they're asking for your thoughts on. If you'll fill that out, and Phyllis has an electronic form she'll be sending to you.
It's in the board packet.
It's in the board
It's
packet.
available to you under your extras tab. It's already there. You can
So-
download it and then complete it.
You can use this as your scratch paper,
The one that's in here?
but if you fill out the one that's online, it'll automatically tabulate so that when we come to that November board meeting, we'll know which of these everybody's in agreement on. So Joe has clear marching orders for when he raises his paddle. And if there's differences where, let's say, some of you say yay and some of you say no, then those can be discussion points at our November meeting, so that, again, Joe can have a clear consensus about which way to go when he goes 2 days later to a vote of the delegate assembly. So, just to recap, you get this reading packet, you'll need to formulate a position, fill out the electronic form that's in the board packet that Phyllis provided, and email it to Joe. That way he will have a record of where you are, and then we'll see what needs to be discussed to try to formulate a position in which things are just clear cut, everybody fell on the same page.
And note that for some reason it's out of order on that resolutions form. Or-
On their form.
Yeah, for whatever reason. So
Yeah,
the numbers match up.
Jim,
Yes.
should we, for our newer board members, just call their attention to the sections where the resolutions, there's a rationale, but then there's a resolutions committee recommendation, and that's information for us to get a sense of, what the committee recommends. It's just, doesn't mean we have to recommend it, but it's always helpful to, keep that in mind that, sometimes I'm not as familiar with some of these things, and it gives us some talking points if we have questions about the resolution to come and talk and ask questions when we get back together. So I just thought that might be helpful to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they do have a position on each one of these things. That doesn't mean that's the way it goes. They have sort of that recommended platform, but after they do the voting, that's what really informs, what they actually do. My apologies, it's a lot of reading, a lot of detail. But question?
I just had a question, having already gone through the ones that we're supposed to vote on and writing myself conspicuous notes. But starting on page 19, they have current positions that are listed, and I just wanted to confirm that these are not gonna be up for anything. We don't have to make a decision on those ones in terms of how we sway on them. It's just the ones prior to page 19 that we need to be looking at. Is that correct?
Right, there are a couple that we're reaffirming. We have to choose whether or not to reaffirm, which is 18 through 21. And I would assume they're already, we'd be voting on reaffirming 116, which is on those pages, so.
Basically, all the ones that appear on the check list are the ones that they're asking for feedback on.
Current positions. Now, we as a board, you as a board member could submit to next year's assembly to, like that's what this is, what's happening here is all of these boards are submitting their own interests. So it's good to know what those current positions are if you wanted to try to change one.
I mean, the thing that plays out here, which is always kind of fascinating, is you get to see, like you'll read one of these and it's like, oh, that makes absolute sense. Of course, for us, it makes absolute sense. But then you can put on the lens of, I'm a district in Southern Illinois. Suddenly, what makes really good sense here doesn't make good sense there. So, you can kind of try to read it with those lenses. It's not necessarily a one size fits all. I remember there was one a couple of years ago that, I don't know if it had to do with like police liaison officers or something. and-
It's still, it's Mercer County that's, they've been, you'll see in the justification, they actually recommended we adopt it, but it's based on how many times they've had to tweak it just to get it. Because I don't think it's even, I think Frank said more often than not, they didn't even get to a vote. A lot of these get tabled so that they don't get struck down.
Yeah, these things impact different districts differently, so.
This might be a very silly question, but like, I just very quickly looked at the sex ed one, for example, right? And it's saying, let's move this to local school boards to make that decision because there's state policy that now says a certain curriculum needs to be taught. So who gets the override, state policy or the school board association?
This is a recommendation, state policy is what we have to follow. This is their attempt to lobby, and so they're trying to get clear direction from their members so that they know how to lobby legislation.
Okay, got it.
So this is,
Thank you for
the only power here is to form a collective opinion, then to approach legislators.
Okay.
Good question.
Mhm. It's several levels of influence.
Okay. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to call.
Unlike Frank, they will not be taking out a hotel room in downtown Chicago for this trip. I'm just gonna commute. We like to make a weekend of it. First reading of policy.
Okay, so unfortunately, we only have two policies to go over tonight. The first one is policy 6235, instruction, specifically access to electronic networks. There's been some clarifying language that defines various types of equipment. And then there's been interestingly enough, there's a paragraph that's been struck and it's been moved to an unpublished footnote.
My favorite kind of footnote.
Yeah, so, I don't quite know what that means, but apparently they didn't find that language to be very important at this point. And then there's a wording change at the bottom where they use more inclusive wording instead of saying students and staff members. They now call them users of district's electronic networks. Any questions about that model? The second one, 6260, instruction, complaints about curriculum, instructional materials and programs. There's been a couple of changes here. There was a legislative change that basically added some additional new language to this. Parents, guardians have the right to inspect any instructional material used as part of their child's educational curriculum pursuant to the school board policy 715, student and family privacy rights. Persons who believe that curriculum, instructional materials, or programs violate rights guaranteed by any law or board policy should file a complaint using board policy 2260 uniform grievance procedure. So it's just clarifying that how people go about filing a complaint, essentially. Any questions there?
Move on to our one action item.
Okay. So
I call for the motion first. or-
Oh.
That's right. I call for the motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between Board of Education of Skokie School District 68 and the District 68 Education Association, clarifying the language in section 71A of the 2021 through 2026 collective bargaining agreement regarding personal sick leave to say, once per career upon resumption of duty, sick leave used for a verified catastrophic illness or accident or childbirth, which required 20 or more consecutive sick days, 10 days of such sick leave will be returned to the teacher's sick leave account. Family illness is to be included in this benefit. Teachers who have accessed this benefit prior to August 21st, 2017 will be eligible on the same basis as those who have not gone forward.
Second. Okay, thank you. So the specificity to that date, August 21st, 2017, that is when the previous contract with the Education Association took effect. In that contract, we modified this language, that paragraph that you read out, the once per career, and in it, what it said at the time is if people had accessed that benefit prior to that contract, that basically that didn't count. They had one more time in their career in District 68 to access that. When we renegotiated the contract this last winter, Matt and Brandy and I all kind of missed that needed to be updated with a new contract and not say starting with this contract. So it still read when we approved that contract, it still read starting this contract. That was never the intent on either side. So this just corrects that so that we're back to that original date for which people have access to that benefit. Any questions? Move forward.
Ruckner,
Yes.
Sturban,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warshaw.
Yes.
Bell Jordan,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Moving on to communication and information, there were 4 requests and/or responses for information under the Freedom of Information Act during the period September 13th through October 15th, 2021. On September 13th, the district received a commercial request from Zoe Yelson of Smart Procure requesting purchase order and vendor information. The response was sent on October 7th. On September 24th, the district received a request from Ronnie Marie Davis of Data Research Partners LLC requesting staff contact information. The response was sent on September 27th. On September 30th, the district received a request from Vince Espy of Local Labs requesting information related to ESSER funds. The response was sent on October 5th. On October 5th, the district received a request from KB Smizer of NBC5 requesting information related to unclaimed funds and unclaimed property reported to the Illinois State Treasurer. The response was sent on October 7th. That was an exciting month for you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's about the highest volume we've had in a month ever.
I was trying to build a plot between all of those. If there is no further business to come before this board, I call for a motion to adjourn.
Sturbin,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warshot,
Yeah.
Bell Jordan, Espinoza,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Brukner,
Yes.